For your next assignment, you're going to have to pass some tests that I've already written for you that I'm showing here. I'm not going to go through each one individually because most of them should make sense automatically, but I do want to point out two key features from these tests that may be new and that I want to make sure you understand. The first is this let exclamation point. You've already seen the let without an exclamation point where we create an object, and here we're going to create an object too. The difference is with this, without this let, our spec does something for efficiency purposes. What it does is what's called lazy evaluation, or it's going to wait until the last possible minute before it tries to create this object, in the hopes that it doesn't have to create it as often or maybe at all. Whereas with this let exclamation point, we say you can't be lazy, you need to absolutely do this now. And so with the this one, it creates user when it possibly can. It creates original name immediately. And the reason why is when original name is used down here, we need that value. And it would be too late if we use the value at that moment. And to understand that, let's look at this test a little bit more because it's a little bit different. This is where we're creating it with invalid information and we give it garbage stuff. So it should fail for any number of reasons. And what we're trying to make sure is that it doesn't change the data in the database. And so what we do is we do this expect the user.reload, and that's new as well. This is the second thing I wanted to point out. What we're doing with the reload is that we actually go to the database and refetch the data from the database. And the reason we want to do that is because user was populated in memory here from Factory Girl. And if we made a submission and updated it, our in-memory value is not going to change to reflect the updates to the database. And so we have to call this reload command to say, hey, go get what was in the database. Because if something went wrong, if the controller and the model didn't see a problem with this data, which they should have, but if they didn't and saved that value, what's in the database is going to be different than what's in memory. And so we're trying to synchronize these and make our memory match what's in the database. And so after we get the database, then we can look at its name. And we want to make sure that it's not equal to that empty string that we put in here. Instead, we want to make sure is what we loaded from the database is equal to the original name. And now you can see why it's really important that we did this non-lazily. If we waited until this moment right here to fetch user.name, we would have already reloaded from the database user. And so user.name here would be what's ever in the database. And we'd be comparing what's in the database to what's in the database. And that's not what we want. We want what's in the database with what started out in the database. And we want to make sure that those two are the same. And so you need to make sure that you don't do a lazy evaluation here. So these are the two things I wanted to show you with the tests, the exclamation point and the reload. I'm not going to go into details because these tests should be very much similar to the tests you've already seen. The only minor changes are we did a patch here instead of a post, excuse me, because we're updating the user rather than creating the user. And that also means that we know exactly which user we are updating, and we don't need the assigns method either. The other thing that I want to point you to for these editing users is if we look at our controller, when we do a creation, we do a new and a save. When you do an update, you don't want to create a new user. Instead, you want to find an existing user that's in your database, and you want to update. That's my key hint for you. Instead of saving, you want to use updates. You may want to search online or some other resources of how to use update, but that is the key method you want to use to differentiate your methods from creating a user.